Okay, so now I have the post screwed up. I can take the lead that goes around. Oh, that's not right.
Swinging on and happy, hippie, yeah. Hippie, yeah.
What's up YouTube? Welcome back to JwXjqT. A good while ago, I uploaded a vertical coil tutorial for the original Subtank Mini RBA base, and up till now it's my most popular video. It has like 130,000 views on it, and a lot of people seem to like it. So yesterday, while I was reviewing the Cthulhu V2, which is this tank right here, I decided to do the same tutorial, a bit upgraded, I guess, for the Cthulhu V2 in the single coil deck that comes in the box. One thing to note, well, a couple things to note. If you follow the same tutorial that I do in this video, except use 24 gauge instead of 26 gauge kanthal wire, I think you'll have a better experience because, first of all, the resistance will be a bit lower, so you can run a bit more power through it, and it's a thicker, stronger wire, so you can use a thicker strand of cotton, which will help with wicking, and I think this tank would handle 24 gauge wire with this build a lot better than the 26 gauge that I'm using right now. But the other thing to note is for the people that had flooding issues with the Subtank Mini tutorial, if you follow the wicking technique that I used in this video, I don't think you'll have any of those flooding issues. So without wasting any of your time, let's go and do the tutorial. Okay, so for this build tutorial that I'm doing for you, these are the tools you're going to need. 26 gauge kanthal wire, a screwdriver, preferably Phillips, but I like to use a very small flathead because I find it doesn't strip the Phillips head screws as much, and it still works. Something to wrap your coils around. I'm using this Coilmaster V3 because it makes things very easy, and it also has a 3.5mm rod, which is pretty necessary for this build. You're going to need wire cutters, a pair of scissors, tweezers, and Japanese organic cotton, preferably something in a pad because the pad will make this build a lot easier. So I cut about 5 or 6 inches of the 26 gauge kanthal wire. I have the 3.5mm rod installed into this Coilmaster, so I'll put this in and I'm going to do 5 wraps. Okay, now take a note of where I left the one lead extending with the direction, and what we want is both leads going in opposite directions, and it should look just like that. There we go. Okay, now this is the single coil deck, and the reason I wanted a 3.5mm rod is because that fits in there perfectly, okay, into that airflow hole. Now when you want to install the coil, you need to get each lead under one of these screws, and if I turn this around, you can see that the one that wraps around the bottom is very easy to fit in there, but the top one, I don't want to have to turn the coil and bend it down, so this is what I'm going to do. And you can see that the lead on the left is going out from the bottom, and the lead on the right is going out from the top. And what I want to do is take the tweezers, grab the lead going out from the top, and bend it down. I can use my finger and just make sure it's going, and that way it's pointing down, but I don't want it to just point down, I want it to go across as well. So I'll come up to just about there and pull down and across. Okay, so you get that kind of odd shape to it, but now when I look at it like this, that's pretty much what I want it to look like. You can see that the lead on the left is the one going out the top of the coil, and when I drop this down, it fits very easily into that left slot, and the bottom one will still fit well. And the coil is a bit high, so while I screw down these screws, I'm going to hold down the coil, and you might not be able to see that. I'll show you. Kind of just pull it down as far as you can go. If it's touching the deck, we'll raise it up after. And there we go. Both leads are screwed in and the coil is still in the middle because we're using this rod to hold it in place. I'll cut the leads now. So this can be pretty tricky because you don't want the wire to be sticking out at all. You don't want it to make a short by touching the metal inside the chimney. So you want to get as close as you can and hopefully not have any metal sticking up. I can see it's a bit loose, so I'll just screw down this a bit more. And we'll see, that's looking pretty good right now. So if I take out this rod, you can see the airflow hole is completely open, so I'm not going to get any restricted airflow, but depending on if you wick it properly, you may or may not have problems with the air. So that's where this next part comes in. Before I put the cotton in, I want to make sure this is glowing evenly, so I have this at, it's reading 0.69 right now, I have this at 18 watts, and I just want to make sure it's glowing from the inside out, and you can see right now it's not doing that, but I'll just pulse it a few times. A very small coil like this, you don't necessarily need to pinch it and all that good stuff, but I mean it would speed up the process, I guess. So if you are going to pinch it, just make sure that you don't mess up the positioning of the coil really. And if you saw what I just did there, I just brushed the coil. And as far as I know, what it does is just kind of scatters the electrons, which are the how do I explain electrons? Particles of electricity. Basically, yeah, and it makes it glow a lot more evenly. If you look on the side here, you can see that there's a bit of wire sticking out, and if that touches the side of the chimney, it's not going to be a good time. It's not going to fire at all, so play around with it, see if you can cut it any closer to the edge. That basically did nothing. And that looks a lot better, so make sure it's still glowing evenly. Perfect. Let's put some cotton in it. Okay, now this is by far the most important point in the build. This is the Japanese organic cotton pad, and the reason I say to use one of these is because we're not cutting the cotton yet. What we're going to do, and you probably see a lot of people doing this when they're building, is taking that outside strand off. And now instead of using this, we're going to use that very thin layer of cotton. Now we want the cotton to only be touching that coil, and as you can see it's a very small coil, so when we're cutting this we want it very, very small. And I'm really hoping that this is small enough, but it's very thin, so you want to be very careful with it. You don't want to break it or anything, but if you can, if it's not enough cotton, we can always add another strand later on. So I'll see if I can zoom in on this and give you a better idea. Now as you can see, one of the leads in the wire is going on the left, and that's kind of under the coil. The one on the right, which we bent down, is going over the coil, so we want to get that cotton underneath that lead. And this is where, if you have trouble with very small things, seeing small things, having not very good dexterity in your fingers, this could be troublesome. So since this is small cotton, we wrap it up very, very small on one end and just thread it under that lead. Then if you can't grab this with your fingers, use the tweezers, but it's not that difficult. And when we're pulling that through, we want to make sure that the cotton is not going underneath that coil, covering the airflow. Okay, that's very, very important. And here is where we actually take a little bit of juice and just wet that cotton. And by wetting it, what it's doing is it's basically turning it into a glue, and it's going to stick directly onto that coil so that it doesn't move around. And then we're going to wrap this around over the top of that lead. Can pull it down a bit, and there we go. As you can see, the cotton is only touching that coil, and that's exactly what we want. Now this part, you want to cross thread it. So actually what we're going to do to make sure that cotton doesn't get in the way, going to put that rod back in, okay? And now when we pull it, we're going to want to pull down on the cotton a bit, and we're going to want to get this as tight as possible without ripping the cotton, okay? And this part on the left will now go over again, and that's going to be pointing down that way over the juice flow control, and this one is going to be doing the same thing on that side. Okay, so that should give you an idea. Now we're just going to cut the ends, and we want to cut it, since these are very small pieces of cotton, we're going to want to cut not too much, right? So just past the edge of the deck, cut that there, and the same thing on this side. Now we can use our screwdriver again, and what we're going to do is just put that cotton into that wicking hole. And that way it's not going to flood. For anyone that had problems with the Subtank Mini flooding, this, if you apply this same method to it, it shouldn't flood either. And it's very, very thin strands of cotton, so you don't have to worry about filling that hole. It should be alright. So now, if we take out this rod, no cotton should be blocking the air hole, and that's looking pretty damn good right now. So let's just wet the cotton a bit more. See what it's reading at. 1 ohm. That's because when you heat up the coil, add cotton and all that stuff, probably by the time we put it back into the tank, it might drop a bit, but that looks like it's vaping pretty well right now. So we can fill up the tank, still using this My Man by One Hit Wonder eliquid. And what am I doing? Filling it from the bottom. I'm a jackass. Okay, we don't need to do that. So the reason we want the coil to be very, very low and as close to that air hole as possible is because if it goes too high above the post, it won't fit in here, and we definitely don't want that to happen. So that should screw directly into there. Make sure it's still firing, and it's not. Awesome. Okay, so the problem was that those little bits of wire that were sticking out the edge of the post, they were touching the metal and not making a connection. So this is 1 ohm right now. We're going to unscrew the top, take our juice, and fill. And the bottle shouldn't go empty this time, which is a great thing. And there we go. Pop the drip tip back on, screw it down nice and tight so it's not going to leak or anything. Kind of difficult to get a grip, as I mentioned in the original review. And we're ready to vape. So this vertical coil build is much more my speed when it comes to vaping in a tank. The resistance is higher than the Clapton coil that I did before. It's not a super hot vape. It doesn't drink through the juice, so I'm not getting massive clouds. I'm getting a warm vape that gives me decent flavor. The flavor is still not amazing on this tank. I don't know what I'm missing out. Apparently everyone loves the flavor on this. I think it's okay. It's not really bad. The airflow is still smooth. I'm still getting full airflow since I made the coil the same diameter as the airflow hole. And I can run this at 15 watts. This is 0.95 ohm coil. I think if you use 24 gauge like I recommended in the beginning, it'll probably come out to 0.5, 0.6 maybe. That's a complete guess, but then you could run probably about 25 to 30 watts and it'll be a much better vape, but this isn't bad right now. It's much more my speed, and If you enjoy vaping like how I like to vape, you don't want massive warm vapes with huge clouds that drink through the juice, I think you'll enjoy this tutorial. Also, it's a lot of fun to do, and it's not really difficult if you follow the same steps that I did. So that's about it. If you have any questions about this build, feel free to ask a question in the comments. I try and answer every question that I get if I can. If you think more people should know about this build and this tutorial and this channel, whatever, feel free to share the video anywhere that you would like, and don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to join the Whacked Out ECIG forum. The link will be in the description, also where to get this Cthulhu V2 at Hazetown Vapes, but don't forget to join the forum. I find that vapors seem to have forgotten about forums and how useful they can be. You can buy, you can sell used gear, you can find good deals and exclusive coupons for different companies, at least within Canada in Whacked Out ECIG, and there's some Chinese vendors on there too that post good deals. You can talk directly to the vendors if you want to, because they have their own subsections, and you can there's a plethora of information and vapors that want to help you, and that you could probably help them in return. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.